Hello, and thanks for stopping by. I'm Joe Pryor, and this is Spreadsheet Excellence. Today, we're going to pick up right where we left off and continue developing our spreadsheet that we wrote in the last episode. We're going to do some exciting things with formulas, and we're going to take a deeper look at formatting. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, so you have your data typed into Excel. We have 1 year of customer service and cleanliness report data, but at the moment, it's kind of just a big jumble of numbers. It doesn't really do you any good. So let's take a couple of easy steps to figure out how we can begin to analyze this data, how we can draw any kind of insights from it, from a business management or business operations perspective. And what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of format this a little more. So we should select these two cells, groupings of cells, cleanliness and the Q1 through Q4 segment of our Excel spreadsheet. We're going to go ahead and give it a color. Let's come up here to the paint bucket, the fill color. And what this will do is it'll allow us to configure the background of these cells. Really, you can do kind of whatever you want to do here. I personally like a lighter blue and then bolding the text. And we'll do the same thing here with customer service, but we're going to go ahead and give it a new color or a different color. And really, this is up to you. This is where you get to operate your own, pizzazz, bring your own personal touch to these spreadsheets. And I know it's kind of a little thing. Adding colors isn't really going to make or break your spreadsheet, but that presentation does actually make a difference in terms of whether or not someone is able to read it or make sense of it. Let's go ahead and wrap these two as well and center justify the word locations. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a gray background. And so we're also going to go ahead and give all of our locations a gray background as well. And why am I doing this? Why am I blocking off this information like this? All of these colors tell the reader that these are the definitional things. This is when in the year all of this is occurring. This is where in your city or state these are all occurring. They tell the user that this information is given by the organization and that this information is what's important. This is the measure or the data. Each of these cell units, this is an entry, a data entry, and it's keyed now to an XY coordinate, so to speak. So Buffalo, Q2, in the cleanliness category in FY19, we now have a lot of information that we can begin to draw from simply the number 17. But it's still just a big jumble of numbers. So let's start drawing some insights from it. The first thing we should do is figure out whether or not our measures here are based in reality. If locations can't meet our values, then it's possible that we've set our goals too high. And what we should do is establish kind of a baseline. So one of the ways you can do that is by taking an average of all of the scores. Now, nominally, you would have to add all of these things up and then divide by however many locations there are. But we're going to go ahead and use Excel. And Excel is going to take care of this for us. And the way that it's going to do that is a simple formula. This is where the power of Excel really begins to take off. Because up until now, you've just been filling in squares. You've just been manually filling in squares by yourself. You're not really saving yourself any time. But when you come up here and you begin a formula, you're always going to start typing equals and then something else. This tells Excel, I'd like to do something with the formula function. There's a number of ways you can get up here. If you come up here to the auto sum button, it will assume you want to do just straight addition. But if you click the pull down button, you have a number of other tools at your disposal, including average. So you could just click average. And you could just click average and it will automatically populate that cell for you. And Excel is smart enough that if you click right here in this cell, C19, it will look all around C19 and say, what is the most obvious direction for me to go to automatically help make an average or make my formula complete? And it looks, in this case, up and finds all these numbers, but stops at Q1. Why? Because Q1 doesn't look like all of the numbers between it, 20, 18, 17, 19. Those are all numbers. And then Q1 suddenly breaks that pattern. And so this tells Excel, oh, that's probably a title. And it is, in this instance. Sometimes Excel will get that wrong, and you can step in. Notice here, this is the syntax of the average formula. Equals average, fully spelled out, and then your cell reference, C10 colon C18. Remember, the colon means inclusive, so it includes both C10 and C18. This little pop-up down here is sort of Excel's way of giving you a cheat sheet to fill these formulae out. The average formula. Then it gives you parentheses and it says, give me a number, comma, give me another number, comma, and then period, period, period. This sort of indicates to you, the user, and then keep going until you're done. So number 3, number 4, number 5, etc. You go ahead and press enter, and then boom, we get our average, 17.44. So that's telling us that in Q1 of 2019, the average cleanliness was about 17.5. And stores that were below that, like Bedford, were performing very poorly. And stores that were above that were doing great. But because the average is pretty high, it seems like everyone's doing an okay job with cleanliness in the first quarter anyway. Now, one of the cool things that we can do with Excel is we can just drag this formula along across the entire bottom here. But I want to build it right here in front of you just so that you can see that you don't have to go to AutoSum. You also don't have to go to the formula button or the formula tab on the ribbon and do it with the mouse and click that way that. But if you wanted to, you could click on the insert function button. And then if you don't know for sure what you're trying to do, just go down this list and look. They'll take a look and they'll explain to you everything that you've got in front of you as far as possible formulas you can go. There's something like 500 formulas you can go through with Excel. But we know what we want to do. And the more you get comfortable with this function, the more you too will know what you want, what formulas you want to do. And here's the cool thing. Even if you're not really sure, you can just start typing and Excel will help you. So I think I want to do an average. Oh, cool. Notice the pop-up box. This gives us a number of different averages or average type functions we can take a look at. And now it gives you a definition as well. So if you don't know for sure, it'll walk you through. All right, so this gives you an average of absolute deviations. Now we're not getting to that point yet. We are going to talk about statistics in this series eventually, but we're not there yet. There's average, for sure we don't want to do that. If you want to keep going down, just press down on the down arrow. Now we already know we want to look at the average, but there are a number of other cool versions of the averages you can take a look at. And so with average A, you give it kind of a true false modifier. If it meets certain criteria, it gets counted, and if it doesn't, etc. For our purposes, we're going to focus on simply the average. Go ahead and press tab, and that will impute that part of the formula into Excel. And then you have to give it like it says. It gives, give me a number, give me another number, etc. Remember over here, it said C10 colon C18. Now we can type that in ourselves, but we're in row D. D10 colon D18. Once I find where the A button is. However, I want to show you another way you can do this. Take your mouse and click in D10 and drag it. Hold the left button and drag it down to D18. All right, so we're going to do it one more time a different way. I know I'm sort of beating a dead horse here, but I want to show you all the different ways you can talk to Excel. All right, click on D10 like we did before. Now hold down the Shift button and click D18. It's the exact same thing as far as Excel is concerned. Close your parentheses and press enter. It's very important when you have parentheses in Excel, you close them, because a parentheses works kind of like math, right? If you have 5 times parentheses 4 plus 3 end parentheses, you're going to do whatever's in the parentheses first before dealing with whatever's outside of it. So now that I've showed you all the different ways we can go ahead and type average, and I've taken more time than that, let's go ahead and just drag it across. Excel will do the rest for us. And this saves us a lot of time. Now, perhaps you don't want to see this many decimal places. Honestly, who does? You have more power over here in the number bar. And in the number bar, you can say, I'd like to decrease the amount of decimals shown. Or, I mean, theoretically, if you're feeling really fancy, you can increase them. But unless you're doing science or advanced statistics, you honestly don't need more than 2. So let's go ahead and shrink it to 2 decimal places. But there's some cool stuff that happens if we go even further. Take a look at some of the average values on the bottom. Specifically, I want to call your attention to quarter 4 of fiscal 2019, 47.667. That's the value you get right now. Every time I decrease the decimal, it keeps moving that 7 up. What happens when I decrease it to the tens digit? There's the 7 again. Now, 47.7 is going to become 48. Why? Because it's rounding up. So the number that you're shown on the screen may not actually be the number happening behind all of the math that's being shown to you. All of the things happening behind the scenes. We've calculated the average of all of our scores. This just gives us a middle baseline. And so if every score went down a little bit between quarter 1 and quarter 2 for cleanliness, that tells us that whatever's happening in quarter 2, theoretically, our stores are having a harder time staying clean. But then in quarter 3 it goes up, quarter 4 it goes down, etc. This can give you all kinds of data, all kinds of information that might get lost in the sea of all of this data. Now, let's go ahead and say that we were going to give them an end of year score. Okay. Let's actually go ahead and merge that. Now, if you merge a cell like this, what's going to happen is it will only take the uppermost and leftmost cell and discard or delete all other values. And that's fine because it's going to give me the end result too. I'll just type in annual total and I'll tell it to wrap. Now, when you tell a cell to wrap, when I don't wrap it, it just kind of flops off the side and that's that. But if I wrap it, it will automatically keep increasing the lines of text it needs in order to fill out the remainder of that cell. And we're going to go ahead and give every store an annual total, a wrap up, to give them an idea of how they've done. So we come over here and we can either click on auto sum and it will just automatically do it for us, which we're going to go ahead and do that this time because I've already explained that if I type in sum and click and drag across this whole thing, we're going to get the score. So let's go ahead and just drag it down. And now we need to calculate our total points possible. And here's where I'm going to show you why parentheses matter. So we're going to do a little bit of algebra, nothing crazy, but there are 4 quarters in a year. And we're going to multiply them by cleanliness. So there's 20 points per quarter, and there are 4 quarters in a year, right? So it's possible that you can only get up to 80 points out of cleanliness in the year. Now I'm going to wrap that in parentheses. And the only reason I'm doing that is so that I know for sure that's one calculation, 4 times B2. And we're going to go ahead and do the same kind of thing again. Wrap it in parentheses 4 times B3. And we're going to close it again. Now, the symbol you use for math in Excel is the same as you would expect. A plus sign is a plus sign, a minus sign is a minus sign. For division, you do a slash. The only one that's a bit different is we type X when we're writing an algebraic formation and we want to do multiplication. In the Excel, you don't type X as a letter, you type asterisk. So now we know that it is theoretically possible to get up to 280. Okay. So the next measure or value or score we're going to go ahead and wrap again is we're going to go ahead and take our value, our total, and we're going to divide it against the possible maximum. And that's going to give us this number. So why can't I just drag this down? Well, it's not doing anything. Why? Because I told it to divide this value by this value. And then when I drag it down, it just continues that logic. And it says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and divide this value by this value. But that's the problem. There's nothing there, right? K11, there's K11, divide by B5. There's nothing in B5. So there's got to be a way we can tell Excel to keep dividing against this number, B4. And we can avoid having to manually type in K11 divided by B4, K12 divided by B4, etc., etc., etc. And there is. And it's called an absolute cell reference. Okay? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to type in B4. And now we're going to go ahead and press F4. And that's going to make it an absolute cell reference. From the visuals you're going to see, and I know that this might be a little harder to see on your screen, you're going to wrap both B and 4, and you're going to put dollar signs in front of either one of them. And that creates an absolute cell reference. And why is that important? This is a relative cell reference. B4 here is a relative cell reference, i.e., this formula will continue to operate on the relative position of the cell or cells you are referencing. In this case, it will take this cell divided by this cell, and it will keep that that concept all the way down. It will take this cell divided by this cell. It will take this cell divided by this cell. It is keeping the relative position the same. When you include an absolute cell reference, it will always treat this as the only value. So let's go ahead and drag this down. And there you go. So now that we've created the formula with an absolute reference, it will always go back to the total points possible. And that's why I'm keeping all my values up here. That's why I'm keeping all of my values up here. And what this allows you to do is keep an eye outside of your data on some of the information that informs your data. Now, this is not so legible. It's fine, but it doesn't really give you an idea of what you're looking at. So let's come back up here to the number button, and let's either click on % or click on the drop down and click on percentage. It's the same effect as what it does, but the drop down gives you a lot of more control over what you're looking at. So if you click on percentage, it turns everything into percentages. And so now we are given more. Let's go ahead and go with the gray again. Okay. Now we have a lot of information about how our locations are doing relative to how theoretically they could do. And let's actually go ahead and drag our measure over here to give us an average of the annual total possible. And it seems like no one did perfectly. So if I was running a business, I'd want to know if this is perfect and no one did perfect. And in fact, the average is quite a bit lower than perfect. What can we do to either push that average up or alternatively ask ourselves, is the measure of possible too high? To me, I would say no. 2 locations managed to get within 96% of maximum. So we would need to take a look at how we're going to go ahead and drag some of these locations up. But that's enough for one episode. We've we've covered a lot of ground, and we're going to cover a lot of ground in the next episode. We have a really good foundation here, and we can do a lot of analysis with this information. But we need to clean it up, we need to work on presentation, and we need to work on formatting our cells even more to make them useful for data analysis. So I can't wait to show you in the next episode how we're going to go ahead and clean this up and start gleaning some real insights from this. But in the meantime, you've created, if you've been following along, your first spreadsheet. And yes, it's a fairly basic spreadsheet, but it's useful. And this is the foundation. This is the foundation of best practice for the kind of spreadsheets you can develop for any kind of project going forward. So I can't wait to see you next time, but until then, this is Joe Pryor. This has been Spreadsheet Excellence, and I'll see you in the next one.